All rise, veuve lever. The International Criminal Court is now in session. L'audience de la Cour pénale internationale est ouverte. Please be seated. Veuillez vous asseoir.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the courtroom. May I ask the court officer to please call the case?
Thank you, Mr. President. The situation in the Republic of Mali in the case of the prosecutor versus Ahmad al-Faqi al-Mahdi. Case reference ICC 0112-0115. For the record, we are in open session.
May I ask counsel to please introduce themselves for the record? The court will now take appearances, starting with the prosecution.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Your Honors, the Office of the Prosecutor is represented this morning by Mr. Gilles Dutertre, Senior Trial Lawyer, Mr. Colin Black, Trial Lawyer, Mr. Jaganaden Munisami, Trial Lawyer, Ms. Sarah Kokio, Assistant Trial Lawyer, Richard Nyanza Baganwa, Corporation Advisor, Sania Bokulich, Case Manager, and myself, Fatou Bensouda, Prosecutor.
Thank you so much, counsel. We turn to the defense.
Good morning, Your Honor, Your Honors. My name is Maître Mohamed Louaini in the Republic of Tunisia, and with me, Jean-Louis Gélissin, member of the Bar Association in Belgium, and with us, Madame Sylviane Emma Gludignon and Madame Judith Akibe and Maître Amin G. Abed Ali. Thank you, President. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Any other appearances?
Good morning, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors.
Good morning.
Appearing today on behalf of the victims, Mohamed Abdou, Associate Legal Officer with the Office of Public Counsel for Victims, assisted by Clara Gerard Rodriguez, Case Manager.
Thank you, counsel. We are here today for the opening of the trial of Mr. Ahmad al-Faqi al-Mahdi. Before the charges are read to the accused, the chamber will turn to several preliminary issues. First, the record will show that the chamber has designated Mr. Mayombo Kasongo as the legal representative of victims. Unfortunately, Mr. Kasongo is unable to attend the commencement of the trial. In order to ensure that the victims' interests are represented, Mr. Kasongo has asked for the OPCV to appear on his behalf. And by way of an email sent on the 19th of August, 2016, the Chamber has accepted this request pursuant to Regulation 81.4.b to c of the regulations of the court. The Chamber has also been informed that Mr. Kasongo did not intend to question any of the testifying witnesses during the trial. Should Mr. Kasongo not arrive in time to provide his submissions later this week, they may be read into the record by the OPCV. And I thank the OPCV for appearing on very short notice. That is the first. Second, in a filing which will be notified today, but was received by the Chamber last week, as an advance courtesy copy. The registry has presented the Chamber with a request by one of the victims, victim A-35008/16, to withdraw his application to participate. The Chamber therefore considers this victim to be withdrawn for purposes of this trial. The Chamber also notes that this victim indicated that he did not wish to have his application communicated to Mr. Kasongo. This application was already communicated to Mr. Kasongo, however, with Decision 156 earlier. But in deference to the victim's wishes, the Chamber, 1, orders the registry to remove Mr. Kasongo's access to the victim's unredacted application and corresponding registry report, namely the confidential ex parte Annex 6 to filing 142 and confidential ex parte Annex D to filing 144 in the case record, and orders Mr. Kasongo to destroy all hard copies of these same filings forthwith. Third, the Chamber has received confirmation from the defense by way of an email on August 19, 2016, that it is impossible for its witnesses to testify this week and that it would file a request to submit their written statements. The defense has already sent the participants in the Chamber courtesy copies of these statements by way of an email yesterday. May I now turn to the prosecution? The Chamber wishes to know if there is any objection from the prosecution to the Chamber considering these statements for purposes of sentencing.
Il n'y a pas d'objection de la part du bureau du procureur, Monsieur le
No
Président.
objection from the
Je
prosecution,
pense que ce sera
Mr.
entièrement
President,
votre appréciation
Your
de
Honors.
donner le poids que
We
la
defer
déclaration
to
du
Your
procureur
Honors,
aujourd'hui.
who would give the necessary weight to the statements in question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, counsel, and defense should note that. In view of there being no objection, counsel.
Shukran.
Thank you, Your Honor. No objection whatsoever. Thank you.
Thank you as well, counsel. In view of there being no objection from the opposing party, the Chamber will consider these statements for purposes of sentencing. Any further comment the participants have on these statements may be made during their respective submissions. Fourth, there are several of these preliminary matters. By way of a separate email sent at 2015 on the 19th of August 2016, the defense informed the Chamber that it wished to make submissions for 6.5 hours, which is nearly 4 times more than they had previously requested and which had been granted in Decision 136. Well, this request comes rather belatedly. Nevertheless, the Chamber will endeavor to accommodate the defense request and make adjustments in the schedule. The schedule today and tomorrow is to sit extended hours as follows: from 9 to 11, and then 11:30 to 13:30, and finally from 1500 to 1700. The Chamber has decided to sit extended hours on Wednesday and Thursday this week in order to afford the defense the possibility of some additional time while still finishing the trial this week as anticipated. This is the only measure that the Chamber will take now in response to your request. Whether the defense will get all of the additional hours it requests for its submissions will be decided upon later this week. Fifth, the Chamber has noted the prosecution's request for the addition of materials to the joint list of evidence sent via email on the 21st of August at 13:16. The Chamber understands that the defense does not object to these additions. Accordingly, the Chamber grants the request and directs the parties to file the updated version of the joint list of evidence as soon as practicable. Sixth, the Chamber wishes to remind all participants at the outset to speak slowly and to wait in between sentences for the benefit of the interpreters. This is particularly important in this trial, as the court is using relay interpretation, first from Arabic to French and then on to English. Seventh, and this is the last of the preliminary matters, the chamber invited the parties to raise any issue which required resolution prior to the commencement of the trial by the 25th of July 2016. No such motions have been filed. However, and noting Rule 134, paragraph 2 of the rules, the chamber will now ask the participants whether they have any remaining objections or observations concerning the conduct of the proceedings, which have arisen since the confirmation hearings. May I hear first from the prosecution?
Monsieur le Président, Messieurs les juges, l'accusation...
Mr. President, Your Honors, the OTP has no objection and no remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, counsel, for the defense.
Thank you, President. In principle, we do not have any objections to the work arrangement since Chamber has agreed to give us Thursday and Friday to continue with the hearing. Then I think we will have sufficient time to make the points that we want to raise. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, counsel. For the victims?
No, Mr. President, we have no observations or objections
Thank you.
at this point.
Thank you, counsel. We will now proceed to the heart of these proceedings, the reading of the charges. I address Mr. Ahmadi. Mr. Ahmadi, in accordance with Article 64, Paragraph 8A of the Rome Statute, the charges will now be read to you, following which you will be invited to make an admission of guilt or plead not guilty. The court officer is now requested, pursuant to my directions on the conduct of the proceedings. Court officer, please read Section B of the operative part of the decision on the confirmation of charges.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ahmadi is criminally responsible for the war crime of directing an attack as set out in Article 8(2)(e)(4 of the statute. In Timbuktu, between approximately 30 June 2012 and 11 July 2012, he intentionally directed an attack against buildings dedicated to religion and historic monuments which were not military objectives, as follows. The Sidi Mahmoud Ben Omar Mohammed Akit Mausoleum, the Sheikh Mohammed Mahmoud Al-Arawani Mausoleum, the Sheikh Sidi El-Mokhtar Ben Sidi Muhammad Al-Kabir Al-County Mausoleum, the Alpha Moya Mausoleum, the Sheikh Muhammad Al-Maki Mausoleum, the Sheikh Abdul Qasim Atwati Mausoleum, the Sheikh Sidi Ahmed Ben Ammar Aragadi Mausoleum, the Sidi Yahya Mosque, the door, and the Bahaber Babadieh Mausoleum and the Ahmed Fulane Mausoleum, both adjoining the Jingaraber Mosque. He is criminally responsible under Article 25(3)(a) as a direct co-perpetrator, Article 25(3)(b) for soliciting and inducing the commission of the crime, Article 25(3)(c) for facilitating the commission of such a crime by aiding, abetting, or otherwise assisting, and Article 25(3)(d) for contributing in any other way to the commission of such a crime by a group of persons acting with a common purpose. Ahmadi is also criminally responsible under Article 25(3)(a) as a direct perpetrator for his physical participation in the attack intentionally directed against the Alpha Moya Mausoleum, the Sheikh Sidi Ahmed Ben Ammar Aragadi Mausoleum, the door of the Sidi Yahya Mosque, and the Ahmed Fulane Mausoleum and the Bahaber Babadier Mausoleum.
Thank you so much, court officer. The court will now proceed to inquire whether the accused wishes to make an admission of guilt or plead not guilty. Mr. Al-Mahdi, please rise.
سيادة الرئيس
Your Honor,
للأسف الشديد إن الكلام الذي سمعته كله صحيح ويستند
regrettably,
إلى واقعية.
I have to say that what I've heard so far is accurate and reflects events. I plead guilty.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Al-Mahdi.
سيادة الرئيس آسف فإن عندي عندي
With your permission, Your Honor, I have a statement to make and I do not know whether this is the right time to read my statement.
Let me just confer with my colleagues. Mr. Al-Mahdi, the chamber will hear your statement.
شكرا جزيلا.
Thank you, Your Honor.
سيادة الرئيس
Mr. President,
أعضاء المحكمة الموقرة
distinguished members of chamber,
السيدات والسادة الحضور
ladies and gentlemen,
أحييكم جميعا.
I greet you all.
بداية أذكر نفسي بقول الله تبارك
I would like
وتعالى
to start by
يا
reminding
الذين
myself
آمنوا
of the words of the Almighty.
قوامين
O
بالقسط
ye who believe,
شهداء لله
stand out firmly for justice
ولو على أنفسكم
as
أو
witnesses to
الوالدين
Allah,
والأقربين.
even
صدق
as
الله.
against yourselves or your parents or your next of kin.
وأستحضر
The
في
words
قلبي
of the
كلام
Almighty.
الحكماء.
I would like to remember the words
الحق ولو على نفسي.
of those who said that we need to speak justice even against ourselves.
ولو أنه
We have to be
حرقك الصدق بنار الوعي.
true to ourselves, even that
السيدات والسادة
truthfulness would burn our hands.
مع أسف شديد
Ladies and gentlemen,
وحزن
it is
عميق
with deep regret
وندم جديد
and with
الإقرار
great
بأن الاتهامات
pain I
التي
had
وجهها
to enter
إلي فريق الادعاء
a guilty plea, and all the charges brought against me are accurate and correct.
لشديد الندم عليها
I am really sorry. I am really remorseful, and I regret all the damage that my actions have caused.
وإخواني
I regret what I had caused to my family, my community in Timbuktu, what I had caused my home nation Mali, and I am really remorseful about what I had caused the international community as a whole.
وأوجه الندم والحزن الشديد
My
بشكل
regret
خاص
is
إلى أحفاد الأولياء
directly
الذين قمت
or is directed particularly to the generations, the ancestors of the
وأستجديهم
holders of the mausoleums that I have destroyed. I would like
كل شعب تمبكتو
to
المسلم
seek their pardon. I would like to seek the pardon of the whole people of Timbuktu. I
وعد
would like to make them a solemn promise
تلك هي الخطيئة
that
الأولى والأخيرة
this was the first and the last wrongful act I will ever commit.
كما كنت من قبل هذه الأحداث
I
ابنا بارا
seek their forgiveness, and I would like them to look at me as a son that has lost his way and
ومتفاعلا معهم
consider me part of the social fabric of Timbuktu, and must not forget what I had contributed in the past to Timbuktu.
تقتضي الأخلاق الإسلامية
It is my hope that, in accordance with the
والصفح على المذنبين
noble Islamic principles, to be able to forgive me
كل عذر مهما كان ضعيف
and to accept my regret.
سبيل رقيهم إلى المكانة
I think if they were to do this, then they would have fulfilled the words of God,
القرآن
where in the Quran,
قوله تعالى فمن
where we
عفا
say,
وأصلح
those
فأجره على الله
who forgive, then they will be rewarded by the Almighty.
ولئن كانت حينها قد تسلطت علي
If
زمرة
I was
من قادة
influenced
القاعدة
by
الدين
a group of deviant people from Al-Qaeda and Ansar al-Din,
ولئن كانت تلك
and
موضعة شديدة
if they were
عصفتني معها
able to influence me, to carry me in their
من أهل العلم في
evil
ذلك
wave
فإن ذلك
through actions that affected the whole population.
بلمحته العابرة تلكم
But
الجذور
even
العميقة
with these
التاريخية لمدينة تمبكتو وأهلها
temporary actions, I do not think that we will be able to change the heritage of the city of
إنني في
Timbuktu.
هذا المقام
Ladies and gentlemen,
أتقبل العقاب
in this chamber, I am willing to accept the judgment
بقلب
of
حنون
the chamber, but I will do so
مليء
with
بالهم والغم
pain and with a broken heart.
مسلوب الحرية
I will be
محروم من
deprived
مؤانسة
of my
الأحباب
freedom, and I know I will not be able to see
أجبر
the loved
خاطري
ones.
بالأمل
However,
في أن يفتح
I
لهذا
am
العقاب
pinning my hope
باب
on the fact
التسامح مع
that
شعب
the
تمبكتو
punishment that will be meted out to me will be sufficient enough for the
ومع
people of
الشعب
Timbuktu
المالي
to
عامة
show forgiveness,
ومع
and for the
الإنسانية
people of
جميعاً.
Mali to forgiveness, and
وأرجو
mankind to
تكون
offer
هذه
forgiveness.
السنوات التي أقضيها في غياهب السجن
It is also my hope that the years I will spend
بمثابة النار
in prison
المطهرة
will be a source of purging the evil spirits that had overtaken me, and
بأن أحظى بالعفو
I
من
will
القلوب التي
keep my
تسمح
hopes high that the people that I have hurt will be able to forgive.
أريد أن أسدي
In
نصيحة
conclusion, I would like
لكل المسلمين في العالم
to make
ألا يقدموا على مثل هذه
to give a piece of
الأعمال
advice to all Muslims in the
التي
world
يشتد ضررها
not to get involved in the same acts I got involved in, because they are not going to lead to any good for humanity.
جزيل الشكر
In conclusion,
للفرقاء
I would like to thank
في محكمة
all
الجنايات الدولية
parties at the
سواء في ذلك القضاة
ICC, judges,
مكتب الادعاء وقلب
OTP,
البحث وعناصر
registry,
مركز الاحتجاز
and staff
على
of
تعاملهم
the
معي
detention
وفق
center
المبادئ الراقية
for dealing with me in such a civilized and
والحفظ لحقوقي
respectable way, where human rights were upheld to the maximum.
والتحقيق معي
And I applaud the way they interviewed me and
وبالأخص
listened to my statement. And
محمد العويني
in particular, I would like to thank
أن
Matter
يساعدني
Muhammad al-Awaini, who decided to
وشكرا
defend me in this case all the way. Thank you.
Thank you too. The court will now proceed to ask you some questions, Mr. Al-Mahdi, pursuant to the Rome Statute. I plan to reduce the list of Mr. Al-Mahdi, can you please rise again?
نعم سيدي.
Yes, Your Honor.
Now that you have made an admission of guilt, this chamber will proceed to ask you some questions. Mr. Al-Mahdi, the chamber would like to know if this admission is made voluntarily. Do you make this admission of guilt voluntarily of your own free will without being threatened or forced by anyone?
بالتأكيد سيادة الرئيس.
Your Honor, absolutely, this is a voluntary admission from the bottom of my heart.
Do you remember signing an agreement with the prosecution regarding an admission of guilt, complete with the supporting factual basis, on February 18, 2016? And was this agreement presented to you in a language you fully understand and speak?
نعم.
Your Honor, yes, it was presented to me in Arabic.
Did you fully consult your counsel before signing the agreement and making your admission in court today?
نعم تشاورت معه وقدم.
Yes, I have consulted the counsels and they presented all the legal advice to me.
Thank you. Do you understand that the chamber is not bound by the terms of the agreement that you signed, and that the chamber is not required to accept your admission of guilt made here today?
نعم أفهم ذلك.
Yes, I do understand that, and it is also mentioned in the text of the document which was presented to me.
By making the admission of guilt and signing the agreement, you have waived many of the rights you would otherwise have as an accused. Do you confirm that waiver?
نعم سيد الرئيس.
Yes, Your Honor, I confirm this, and I confirm what I have signed in this agreement.
We now proceed to the questions on the sentencing range. Mr. Al-Mahdi, you understand that the chamber is not bound by the 9-year to 11-year sentencing range you have agreed to with the prosecution.
نعم أعلم.
Yes, I do know that.
Thank you. And you understand that the crime you are admitting guilt to can carry a maximum term of 30 years.
نعم فهمت ذلك عن طريق الوثيقة.
Yes, I have understood that in the document which was presented to me.
And the last question, counsel, you understand that in the event of a conviction, the court can also order a fine or forfeiture and order reparations for the victims.
نعم أعرف ذلك.
Yes, I do know that.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Mahdi. May I ask my colleagues if they wish to ask their own questions? No, I think you should proceed. Judge Bindua wishes to ask some questions.
Veuillez m'excuser.
Mr. Gilisen, I beg your pardon, and I thank you very much, Your Honor. We fear that there may be a misunderstanding, and I turn to my colleagues from the OTP just to clear up any ambiguity regarding the scale of possible sentencing. You mentioned 9 to 11 years, which is not binding upon the bench. This is not anything that we agreed to. This is a range And to be more specific, there will not be an appeal. There could be a lesser charge, or my colleagues sentencing, or my colleagues could ask for a stiffer sentence. But in any event, this is the range for which we agreed that there would not be an appeal.
Thank you, counsel, for the prosecution.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je confirme en effet.
Mr. Dutel, yes, indeed. Under the terms of the agreement that the defense and the OTP have agreed to, and there was an agreement that the OTP would seek a sentence of 9 to 11 years, and that the defense would not appeal a sentence of 9 to 11 years.
Thank you to both counsels. The chamber notes the clarifications. We now proceed to the question of Judge Bindua.
Monsieur l'accusé, vous venez de faire un aveu.
Sir, you have just made an admission. You have just made an admission of guilt.
Et dans votre déclaration,
and in your opening statement,
vous avez souligné
you
votre foi
stressed your faith in God and your desire to see justice done.
En même temps, vous avez
At the same time, you have promised
de ne plus recommencer
to
à poser
never
des actes que vous
carry out such actions ever again, the actions that you have mentioned today, and you say that this is your first offense.
Alors,
Thus,
quelque chose que je ne comprends pas.
there is something that I do not understand, and this is why I'm asking you my question, and I hope you will be able to answer and shed light on the matter. You,
Vous-même ou en
yourself,
à la destruction des monuments
along with others, destroyed a number of cultural and religious
au motif que c'était la volonté de Dieu.
events, or buildings, saying that you did it because of your religious beliefs. And now you are telling us you will no longer do any such thing.
Vous avez changé de
Does this mean that your religious convictions have changed?
vous ne changez pas de
Because if your religious convictions have not changed regarding the destruction of cultural and religious buildings, this means that
occasion, vous
as soon as you have an opportunity, you will do the same thing again. And thus,
savez peut-être en
and
criminel,
you may realize that the duration of the sentence
pour la société,
in the eyes of society and in the eyes of the guilty, well, I believe you understand the sentence that you face. So to sum up, allow me to ask you this. Have you changed your mind about your religious convictions?
أولا شكرا.
First and foremost, thank you, Your Honor.
لو تمت مراجعة الإفادات التي أعطيتها سابقا
If you review my former statements, you will see
أنني لم أكن مقتنعا
that I was not convinced
القيام بمثل
originally
هذه الأعمال.
with the appropriateness to undertake such actions
الحكم الفقهي
from the beginning, because
هو على معيار الجواز الشرعي
the decisions I had made were made on the basis of a legal decision.
على النظريات
I said that what I did was based on
على القبور
a theory according to which one cannot build anything on tombs.
عدم جواز أن يرتفع القبر أكثر من شبر
And a
اتفق عليه في
tomb, according to the religious beliefs, should not be over 1 inch above the ground. And those mausoleums are far higher than that. So is this something agreed upon or not? Those who believe that they can do it consider that it's okay, that Others believe that those buildings should be destroyed. And I acted because I believed that one is not allowed to build upon tombs. But from a legal and political viewpoint, one should not undertake actions that will cause damage that is higher or more severe than the usefulness of the action. Such mausoleums I believe are not as harmful as the contradiction they represent as they are built on tombs. But the people who controlled the country at the time considered that such mausoleums went against the law, and I was asked by them to destroy them. And as I was under their authority, I had to undertake this campaign of destruction. So, I was at the time president of a commission, and I considered that I had to follow the orders. But I believe that undertaking such actions was possible. According to Islamic law, some things can be allowed, others not. And the scholars say that some things could be allowed, others not. I commit myself not to undertake such action again, as it will cause damage to others. Thus, I believe that by doing that, I do not change my beliefs. I should not undertake action that will cause damage to others. This is a former belief and a present belief of mine, sir.
Après votre longue explication,
Judge Kasia Mbe, thank you for your explanations. They were rather lengthy. For the time being, I will take this under advisement.
Thank you, Judge Mindua. Judge Schmidt has signified that he has no questions. Thank you, Mr. Al-Mahdi, for answering all of the Chamber's questions. And having received the admission of guilt, it is now, the Chamber now turns to receive the prosecution's submissions and the examination of its 3 witnesses. Madam Prosecutor, the prosecution has been given a total of 12 hours for these purposes. During this time, the prosecution must cover all submissions it would make at trial, including opening and closing statements, its presentation of evidence, and submissions of the kind which would be advanced at a sentencing hearing. You may also present your submissions and witness examination in any order, so long as it remains within the allotted time. Prosecution, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Ms. Bensouda, thank you, Your Honor. Mr. President, Your Honors, Mr. Ahmed Al-Faqi Al-Mahdi, known as Abdou Tourab, this being his nom de guerre, now appears before your chamber. He will answer charges relating to the attack in Timbuktu in June and July 2012, attacks upon highly significant historic and religious buildings. These buildings, for the most part mausoleums of Muslim saints, were the most well-known buildings within Timbuktu, and they were a major part of that ancient city's historic heritage. In a broader sense, they were part of the heritage of Mali and of all of Africa, and indeed the entire world. all but one were recorded on the World Heritage List, and yet these buildings were deliberately destroyed by Mr. Mahdi and his co-perpetrators as the people of Timbuktu stood there powerless. Mr. Mahdi, a member of Ansar Din, was directly involved in the groups that were established by two armed groups, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, Akim, and Ansar Dina during the occupation of Timbuktu in 2012. Working through these bodies, these groups, he took part in a number of activities intended to impose their ideology upon the people and to dominate them. In particular, he was appointed to head up the Hezba, the Morality Brigade. In April 2012, he set up this body and led it from the time of its creation until September 2012 as the leader of the Hezba, which he led directly. He supervised the attack upon the 10 buildings. My office has gathered a large amount of diverse and highly incriminating evidence showing that the accused played a central role in the destruction. He identified the sites that were to be destroyed. He decided the order in which the buildings would be destroyed, going from the north of the town to the south. He provided the material means to carry out the destruction, and he gave the orders. Mr. President, Your Honors, this must be said, and this must be said clearly. Deliberately leading an attack upon historic monuments and buildings devoted to religion is a war crime that is provided for in the Rome Statute. These are serious crimes that must be brought to justice. As we know, this is the very first time that the International Criminal Court has tried a person accused of such serious crimes. Thus, today's trial is historic. It is particularly historic because the period of time in question was one of destructive rage. The heritage of mankind was ransacked, and this was planned, ransacked by individuals and groups. Their goal was to destroy any worldview that was different from them by destroying the various material elements that lie at the heart of a number of communities. They wanted to destroy these monuments, simply wipe them off the map. Your Honors, this strikes at the very heart of this trial. What is so serious about this crime is that it is a deep attack upon the identity of a population, their memory, and their very future. This is a crime for which there is a victim, and I speak of the true wealth of communities, entire communities. This is a crime that leaves us all diminished, a crime that strikes a blow and does great harm to the universal values that we must protect. The evidence that my office has gathered will lead you to Timbuktu, a city that was oppressed, a city that bore scars, a city that was badly damaged over a 10-day period in 2012. What happened in Timbuktu is truly a dark page in the history of this city. Allow me to tell you that the mausoleums of the holy saints, the holy Muslim saints, represented something very important. They were something very important to the hearts of people for many centuries. I will continue my remarks in English, if you will.
Timbuktu is indeed an ancient and vibrant city. Timbuktu's name is one that is commonly associated with a rich history and culture. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Timbuktu became a regional center of economic activity and trade. More importantly, it blossomed into one of Africa's most vibrant intellectual and spiritual capitals. It played an essential role in the expansion of Islam in Africa. It was, to be sure, the cradle of education, where enlightenment was nurtured for the benefit of generations of students, attracting scholars from far and wide. Some of these sages would be venerated as Muslim saints, and mausoleums would be erected on their graves to honor their memory, as well as the notable contributions they made to the lives of people of Timbuktu and beyond. These mausoleums, which survived the ravages of time, have continued to play a fundamental, even foundational role in both the life within the city gates and beyond the city's borders. These monuments, Your Honors, were living testimony to Timbuktu's glorious past. These mausoleums undoubtedly also served as a unique testament to the city's urban settlements. But above all, they were the embodiment of Malian history, captured in tangible form from an era long gone, yet still very much vivid in the memory and pride of the people who so dearly cherished them. The mausoleums also testify to the historical role Timbuktu played in the spread of Islam in Africa and in the history of Africa itself. They are relics of a great chapter in humankind's intellectual and spiritual development on the continent, which gave Timbuktu its standing in the world. This is particularly important in a society that is partly rooted in oral tradition. And it is notably for these reasons that they are so precious and were inscribed in the World Heritage List in 1988. What is more, the mausoleums of Timbuktu played and continue to play an important religious role in the daily lives of the city's inhabitants. Mausoleums are sacred places of worship. They are frequently visited by the city's residents. Pilgrims would also come from distant places to pay their respects and to pray. Going to the mausoleums was and still is an expression of one's faith and religious piety. It is specifically these deeply rooted religious practices and beliefs that Ansar Din and Akim wanted to annihilate by destroying these mausoleums. Through their brutal and callous acts, they made it impossible for the inhabitants of Timbuktu to devote themselves to their religious practices during the 10 months of occupation of their city. Our evidence, Your Honors, will demonstrate how important these mausoleums were to the people of Timbuktu. During the course of this trial, you will hear from witness P0431. The testimony to be tendered by this witness will describe how, as soon as the armed groups were driven out of the city in 2013, the residents of Timbuktu returned to pray at the ruins of the mausoleums. This is how deep the connection is between the mausoleums and the people of Timbuktu. Additionally, the mausoleums played a great key role in fostering the social cohesion that is so characteristic of Timbuktu. The mausoleums are related to families who take care of them and resort when needed to masons. These masons are considered to be a living human treasures for their unique craftsmanship. And while they are the ones who maintain these buildings, the renovation of a mausoleum is a task in which the entire community joins and participates. Everyone helps the masons. At the level of neighborhoods, materials are collected and meetings are held. It is an event that brings together and unites worshippers, different age groups, and the community as a whole. These are not the only social functions linked to the mausoleums. The mausoleums, which were destroyed, also contributed greatly to what I would call the workshop of peaceful coexistence. Consider the names of the mausoleums. They remind us that the Muslim saints to whom the mausoleums were dedicated came from different backgrounds and tribes. One is called the Sidi Mahmud ben Omar Muhammad Aki Mausoleum, after the name of the saint, Sidi Mahmud ben Omar Muhammad Aki, a San Haji who lived in the 16th century. Another one is called the Sheikh Sidi Ahmed ben Amar Aragadi. This was named after a revered Muslim scholar and saint, a Kunta who lived in the 18th century. By the mere fact of their names, these mausoleums conveyed a message of tolerance and peaceful existence transcending differences. Last but certainly not least, the destroyed mausoleums played a crucial role in shaping the identity of the people of Timbuktu. Timbuktu is known as the city of 333 saints. The mausoleums were the contemporary living symbol of the city. As one resident of the city declared at the time of the destructions, and I quote, "The people are very, very angry today because the mausoleum is the symbol of Timbuktu." To destroy Timbuktu's mausoleums is therefore to erase an element of collective identity built through the ages. It is to eradicate a civilization's landmark. It is the destruction of the roots of an entire people which irremediably affects its social attitudes, practices, and structures. Another inhabitant of Timbuktu summarized this notion as follows: Timbuktu is on the verge of losing her soul. Timbuktu is threatened by outrageous acts of vandalism. Timbuktu is being held under a sharpened blade, ready for use in a cold-blooded murder. Your Honors, culture is who we are. Our ancestors created paintings, sculptures, mosques, temples, and other forms of cultural possessions all around us. They put their hearts and souls into the creation of such cultural heritage so that it represents the cultural identity of their times and is passed on for the benefit of future generations. Indeed, this cultural heritage shapes the spirit and identity of our own generation and of generations to come. With the passage of time, they become archetypes of social memory from which individuals shape their identity and grow. Make no mistake, for centuries, the mausoleums of Timbuktu have been an important foundational block on which the identity of the city's inhabitants has been built. That continues to be very much true today. To be born and raised in Timbuktu is to be inspired and shaped by the centuries-old mosques and mausoleums that personify this historic city's cultural foundation. I ask all of us to imagine, if only for a second, what it must have felt like then in that fateful day in 2012, that fateful period, to witness the wanton destruction of this cherished cultural heritage, a deliberate assault on one's identity, spiritual beliefs, and prized cultural possessions. Your Honors, all of this was reduced to dust by a destruction operation led by the accused. By eradicating the mausoleums, Mr. Al-Mahdi intentionally destroyed something that is intangible and immeasurable. Mr. Al-Mahdi himself comes from the Timbuktu region, and as a result, was fully aware of the importance of the mausoleums and their significance to the city's inhabitants. Nonetheless, he showed determination and focus in his supervision of the operations. He ensured he was present at every single site that was targeted and destroyed. You can see him in video clips presented, unreservedly holding his pickaxe. You can also hear him confidently and repeatedly attempting to justify these crimes by reiterating his resolve to eliminate all things he labeled as being inappropriate to Timbuktu. Images speak 1,000 words indeed, but so does the accused expressed intent. These are all found in the open source material included in the prosecution and defense joint list of evidence. Your Honors, the commission of such a crime is not merely a deplorable event. This type of crime, wherever it may happen in the world, presents the international community today with enormous challenges. And with your indulgence, I would like to highlight 3 general points in this regard. The first is that deliberate attacks on cultural property are often the precursor to the worst outrages against a population. As some learned observers have noted, the struggle to defend cultural property of a population is an integral part of the humanitarian operation aimed at protecting that population. The second aspect, one of greater concern, is that deliberate attacks on cultural property have become actual weapons of war. They are being used to eliminate entire communities and wipe out the traces left of them, their history and identity, as though they never existed. Let us consider the example of the town of Zvornik. As the trial of fact established in the relevant case, the Serbs destroyed 5 mosques in that town. Later, the mayor of the overrun town was quoted uttering this revisionist account. There were never, he proclaimed, any mosques in Zvornik, unquote. To be sure, attacks on historic monuments and buildings dedicated to religion are de facto attacks on the very people that hold such tangible possessions dear and near to their cultural identity. Lastly, the protection of cultural heritage is an essential part of the post-conflict social reconstruction and reconciliation process. This is because cultural heritage gives meaning as well as a sense of continuity and direction from the past to the future. Cultural heritage provides reference points. Once destroyed, as noted by the UN International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, the restoration of cultural heritage never brings back its inherent value. These complex issues and concerns must propel us to act. Deliberate attacks against historic monuments and buildings dedicated to religion are grave offenses with significant debilitating impact, first on affected communities, but also far beyond the socio-geographical space they occupy. We must stand firm in our resolve to end impunity for such serious crimes. Your Honors, Today, the accused, Mr. Ahmad al-Faqi al-Mahdi, has confirmed that he makes an admission of guilt. It is now entirely for your honors to consider his admission of guilt, which he made through the agreement he has signed with my office. This is an admission the accused has consistently given and voluntarily so, while fully informed and assisted by legal counsel. The general terms of this agreement were published on Friday last week. He fully recognizes the facts of the case and his own individual responsibility. I am pleased and satisfied with this development in the case. I am satisfied because it is the first ever admission of guilt before the court. Mr. al-Mahdi was transferred to the court less than 1 year ago. The current trial should take only a few days. It will contribute to the expeditiousness of proceedings, and such expeditiousness will benefit the victims just as much as it will benefit the accused. Above all, I am satisfied because Mr. al-Mahdi's admission directly helps bring justice. It helps uncover the truth and leads to the catharsis that should arise from any judicial process. In preparation of this case, my office collected overwhelming evidence of guilt of the accused. You will have the opportunity to judge this for yourselves in the coming hours. An admission of guilt facilitates the establishment of the truth. The fact that the accused recognizes his criminal responsibility is crucial for Timbuktu's victims. It will also support the conciliation process in the field. In addition, this admission of guilt and your Honor's ultimate judgment will set a clear precedent, sending an important and positive message to the entire world. One must not forget that this attack rightfully raised a chorus of protest, not only from the affected community and Mali more generally, but also from the international community. The African Union, the United Nations Security Council, the Economic Community of West African States, UNESCO, and numerous states expressed their strong condemnation of the war crime committed. The United Nations Security Council itself stated that the perpetrators must be held accountable, while the chairperson of the African group at UNESCO emphasized that it is not only Mali which is affected by these destructions. Mali's heritage sites are Africa's heritage sites, and they are also the world's heritage sites, unquote. Indeed, it is our world heritage that was harmed by the destruction of 9 UNESCO-listed sites, which were among the 10 destroyed sites in Timbuktu. Your Honors, the appeals of the Malian and the international community to take action against such serious crimes must yield results. It falls to your honors to ensure that the accused is held responsible. It falls to your chamber to lay the first block of the court's jurisprudence in this area. The world in the 21st century has witnessed too many attacks against historic monuments and buildings dedicated to religion. This worrying trend must be stopped in its tracks. This regrettable reality must cease to be. Recently, we have seen the calamitous destruction of Palmyra, and just last month, we saw the so-called ISIS destroy yet another historic monument, a mausoleum north of Baghdad. My message today is this: our cultural heritage is not a luxury good. Our cultural heritage is a vital instrument of human development. To protect cultural property is to protect our culture, our history, our identity, and our ways of expressing faith and practicing religion for current and future generations. We must protect our common heritage from desecration, ravages, and the long-term effects of such destructive acts. The severity of the crimes committed in this case calls for an appropriate punishment, one that is firm and serves as a deterrent while taking into account all of the accused's particular circumstances, including his admission of guilt and cooperation. Your judgment is awaited from the ancient streets of Timbuktu and throughout Mali to all four corners of the world. As I have mentioned in prior proceedings in this case, history itself, whose physical embodiment is at peril through such attacks, will not be generous to our failure to care or to act decisively. I thank you, Mr. President, Your Honors, for your attention. And with your leave, I will now give the floor to my learned colleague, Mr. Gilles Dutertre, the senior trial lawyer from the prosecution team, to present a more detailed outline of the case. I thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dutertre.
Monsieur le Président, je vous demande
Your Honor,
une petite minute
I would just ask to have a minute in order to change place. Thank you very much.
Monsieur le Président,
Your Honor, Your Honors, the prosecutor has just mentioned the reasons why the protection of historical, religious and cultural heritage is so essential, to the point that the attacks against this heritage, attacks directed against religious buildings and historical monuments, are war crimes, which are specifically sanctioned under the Rome Statute. The objective of my intervention at the start of this trial, which could be the shortest carried out by the ICC, is twofold. First of all, it is to shed light for you and the public on the facts in this case and the abundant evidence that demonstrates the guilt of Mr. Mahdi beyond reasonable doubt. It is also to explain to you why, among all the evidence that the prosecution has brought together, it has decided to present over the coming days a limited selection of the evidence. In this regard, I shall develop 7 points successively, and I think I will be finished before the 11 o'clock break. Firstly, Your Honor, Your Honours, I am quickly going to go over the occupation of the town of Timbuktu by the armed groups Ansar Din and Akim between April 2012 and January 2013. And I shall do so with a view to putting the people and the facts in their context. None of this is challenged by the accused. Secondly, I will speak about our investigation, and I shall go over the different types of evidence upon which the prosecution is basing itself in this case. This evidence is accepted by the accused. Furthermore, we have filed lists of non-contested materials as well as a joint list of evidence, which is something you reminded us of at the beginning. And I'm talking about video evidence which shows the accused destroying mausoleums, and I shall refer to certain scientific evidence. Thirdly, I will also go into an important part of evidence, that is the statement given by Mr. Mahdi in September 2015 to the prosecution. I'll present multiple facts that Mr. Mahdi expressly recognized, crimes that he admitted again when in 2016 he signed an agreement with the prosecution on his admission of guilt. Fourthly, I will present more in detail who Mr. Mahdi is and the role which he played in Timbuktu during the occupation of the town. Evidence, including his own admissions, show that he was an important figure, a key figure among the measures put into place by the occupiers, particularly to implement the common plan, which led to the attack against the religious buildings and historic monuments. Fifthly, I will go directly into the attack against the 9 mausoleums which are considered sacred, such as Sidi Mosque, and I will show that what Mr. Mahdi did to each site and that he had a key role in the operation. Sixthly, I will explain the mode of responsibility which best reflects Mr. Mahdi's role in the attack, namely his participation in the crime as a direct co-perpetrator. He expressly recognized this role in the agreement which I have just mentioned. And seventh, in light of all this and the recognition of guilt, I will explain what the prosecution intends to do during this trial. It will limit itself in this hearing to presenting some specific and relevant pieces of elements for the determination of the sentence. And I will go on to my first point. What are the general circumstances of the crime? Now, these circumstances are that of a town taken and occupied. It's established that an armed conflict started in January 2012 in North Mali with attacks carried out in Menaka, Agaluk and Tessalit. In this context, the armed groups Ansar Din and Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb took control of northern Mali. In 3 months, they arrived in Timbuktu at the end of March, start of April, and these groups occupied the town until they fled middle of January 2013, faced with the Malian army supported by French forces. During all this period, from April 2002 to January 2013, members of Ansar Din and Akim imposed their law and their power on the people of Timbuktu. In order to do so, they created bodies which used force and violence against the civilian population who were without defense in Timbuktu. They set up an Islamic tribunal, a morality brigade, and Islamic religious police. Everything functioned under the leadership of an emirate or presidency. This emirate was composed of 3 persons: Abu Zaid, Yahya Abu al-Haman, and Abdallah Anchingeti. Abu Zaid, of Algerian origin and a historical member of Akim, was the leader of the Tariq ibn Zayed battalion, that is to say, one of the 4 battalions which was the armed forces of Akim. He was known for taking hostages. Yahya Abu al-Haman was also of Algerian origin, the leader of the Al-Furqan battalion, another of the 4 Akim battalions, and in September 2012 he became emir of Akim for the Sahel. Abdallah al-Chingeti was of Mauritanian origin, a preacher and an influential person within Akim. He was the head of the Al-Furqan battalion after the promotion of Yahya. This emirate of 3 people, Your Honours, based in Timbuktu, worked in close collaboration with Iyad Ag Ghali. Iyad Ag Ghali is a Malian, the founder of Ansar Din, the leader as well, and he was the person who presented the members of the emirate to the population when the town was taken. He was present in Timbuktu in the first days to set up the new authority based in Kidal. He regularly came back to Timbuktu during all the period of the occupation. I would now ask the court officer to give us access to the evidence, if it could be shown, if it could now be shown.
Vous allez voir maintenant à l'écran.
You will now see on the screen an organogram of the different organs. The presidency, which is composed Abu Zaid, and then the Hezbollah, so the Islamic Tribunal, the Islamic Police, and into that we add the Security Battalion and the Media Commission as well. Mr. Al-Mahdi was the leader or head of the Hezbollah, and it was these organs and these people who oppressed the people of Timbuktu in different ways for almost a year. It was his men and structures that organized and carried out the attack and the destruction of 9 mausoleums and the door of Sidi Yahya Mosque, an attack which was carried out and supervised by the accused in June 2012. Your Honour, Your Honours, I now come to my second point, that's to say the investigation of the prosecution on the destruction and the evidence that has been gathered. The investigation was difficult.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Your Honour. The investigation was difficult, taking into account the security context in the north of Mali and the need to avoid any risk for witnesses and victims. Over time, the prosecution was able to bring together varied and solid evidence establishing the crimes and the alleged crimes in a clear way and beyond reasonable doubt. In addition to the evidence relating to a armed conflict, the prosecution evidence accepted by the accused perfectly established that there were mausoleums built in Timbuktu before the attack, that these buildings were historic monuments and they were religious buildings as well, that these buildings were attacked, that the attackers were members of Ansar Din and Akim following a common plan to which Mr. Al-Mahdi was part of, and finally that Mr. Al-Mahdi played a key role in the attack and the destruction operations on the mausoleums and the door of Sidi Yahya Mosque. What is this varied and numerous evidence? Well, documentary evidence on the mausoleum and their history, satellite images which show the mausoleums before and after the destruction, archive photographs of the mausoleum taken at different times, including photographs taken after Ansar Din and Acme left in January 2013, documents on the legal status of these buildings from national institutions such as the Malian Minister of Culture or UNESCO. Audio recordings on the internet, found on the internet, containing statements from such and such a member of armed groups, including about UNESCO. Video recordings on the internet which show the destruction at the time of the attack with Mr. Al-Mahdi in action very clearly in the picture, and you will see an extract of a video with Mr. Al-Mahdi with a pick who is destroying the mosque. We also have a geolocalization report from expert witness P193, which made it possible to locate with certainty each video with regard to a precise mausoleum. We have an expert report from P75, which made it possible to state the dates of the videos and ascribe a time frame of June and July 2012 to them. We also have a panoramic views 360 degrees, which show the different sites, scientific police reports which have been carried out on the scenes of destruction by our teams, other expert reports, for example, an architect, which showed the scale of the damage, and documents from the Malian army and armed groups, which make it possible to better understand the functioning of these groups in Timbuktu. And we also have the witness statements, either taken by the national authorities or by the Office of the Prosecutor. All this evidence shows that Mr. Al-Mahdi is without doubt responsible for the alleged crimes, and this is quite irrespective of his admissions. With regard to all the evidence, we have to add the statement given to the investigators of the Office of the Prosecutor, and that is the subject of the third point. Mr. Al-Mahdi gave a statement in September 2015 to prosecution investigators when he was in detention in Niger. When they took this voluntary declaration or statement, it took 5 days, and on this occasion, he recognized in full the crimes and admitted his responsibility. And in particular, this isn't an exhaustive list, but Al-Mahdi admitted that Abu Zaid asked him to set up the Hezbollah, the morality brigade, responsible for the prevention of apparent vice and to promote proper behavior and repress behavior considered to be against the rules of the occupiers. And that was a key part of the control strategy set up by the armed groups. Al-Mahdi also stated that Abu Zaid had appointed him leader of the Hezbollah. He led it until September 2012. Al-Mahdi stated that before the destruction, Abu Zaid told him that the decision to destroy the mausoleum had been taken by Ayaz Aghali. Al-Mahdi indicated that responsibility for carrying out the destruction was up to him personally in his position as leader of the Hezbollah. Mr. Al-Mahdi stated that he had the choice of accepting or refusing to carry out the destruction. He admitted having freely accepted to carry out the attack. He admitted having written the Friday sermon on the destruction of the mausoleum, which was read out by imams the day before the attack. Al-Mahdi recognized having supervised the attack against these religious and historic buildings, and he was physically involved in it and controlled the execution of the operations. And more precisely, on this point, he recognized the 7 essential following points on the way the attack occurred. He determined the sequence in which the different mausoleums were going to be destroyed. He gave instructions to the attackers on the way in which they should operate and behave. He brought and distributed the necessary tools. He also admitted that he was physically present in the sites that were attacked. He recognized that he employed his own men of the Hezbollah and supervised other members of groups made available to him to carry out the operations. And he recognized that he physically participated in the destruction of some of the sites attacked. And in the agreement signed with the prosecution in 2016, several months later, Al-Mahdi confirmed in his statements, and he decided to plead guilty for the charges against him. This agreement, signed with the prosecution, lists a certain number of other co-perpetrators who I shall list because it will make it possible for you to better understand who we shall be saying later when we present the evidence. There was Abu Dada, a member of the Office for the Media and responsible for 2 local radio stations controlled by the occupiers. There was also Radwan, a co-perpetrator, member of Akim, who was a member of the Islamic Tribunal and also the office responsible for the media. There was Abu al-Bara, a preacher known by Akim. Abu Tala, a member of Akim, responsible for security. Adama, first head of the Islamic police, is now deceased. Abu Bakr, a notorious member of the Hesba, Mohammed Hama, a member of the Hesba, Zakaria, member of the Hesba, Yusuf, member of the office responsible for the media, and also, but it's not an exhaustive list, Abu Sayyaf from the battalion led by Tariq ibn Zaid. So in this context, and this is my fourth point, Your Honour, Your Honours, please allow me to describe in greater detail who Mr. Al-Mahdi was and the role he played in Timbuktu during the occupation of the town in 2012. All that I will present to you is based on all the evidence mentioned and the interviews of Mr. Al-Mahdi. Mr. Al-Mahdi is from the region of Timbuktu. He's a Tuareg from the Ansar Tuareg tribe. He is the son of a Marabout. He is well known within his tribe and exercises a certain influence therein. While he was a student, he had been noticed by members of Akim who were seduced by his activities and his opinions. Mr. Al-Mahdi indicated to us that he didn't know that until after the facts which are subject to the present case. In 2012, when the conflict broke out, Al-Mahdi said that he left Timbuktu to find shelter for his family, and then when the armed groups took Timbuktu at the end of March, he returned there and joined them, Ansar Din in particular. He was considered one of the religious specialists within these groups, and in this regard, he joined different organs and fulfilled different roles. He was close to and worked with the leaders of the town, such as Abu Zaid, a key figure with whom he recognized having links of friendship and trust. Precisely, the evidence shows that Al-Mahdi had influence on Abu Zaid from the start of the occupation at the time when everything was being set up. And how did this happen in practice? Well, from the first days of the occupation in April 2012, Iyad Ghali and Abu Zaid organized a meeting in the town of the hotel in Timbuktu. Their aim was to explain to the people of Timbuktu what their objectives were and to call for their support. The name of Al-Mahdi figures on a list that Iyad Ghali had in his possession. This list has the names of persons in the region who are erudite in religious matters. Al-Mahdi went to the meeting in question in the company of Faqi, the future judge of the Islamic Tribunal. Al-Mahdi states that the day after, Abu Zaid invited him to see him. Abu Zaid explained to Al-Mahdi that he had been appointed governor of Timbuktu by Iyad Ghali. Abu Zaid discussed with Al-Mahdi the creation of institutions to be set up, and in particular, an Islamic tribunal of the Hesba, the morality police. They also discussed figures in the region who were educated enough and able to be responsible for these institutions.
2 days later, and still in early April 2012, Abu Zaid asked Al-Mahdi to create and lead up Hesba, which he did over a period of several months. And you can now see on your screen an excerpt of France 2 report in which Mr. Al-Mahdi is seen wearing the Hesba vest. That is the Morality Brigade. You can see his profile from top and also from the back to the right. Therefore, Mr. Al-Mahdi was involved operationally with the organs that had been set up by Ansar Din and ACME for the administration of the city and to control the population as well as impose their ideology. In addition to Hesba, Mr. Al-Mahdi was also involved in the work of the Islamic Tribunal in Timbuktu, as demonstrated in his statements and the documentary evidence and videos. On one of the videos, Mr. Ahmadi is sitting to the right of Judge Huka and has a discussion with him during the hearing. Furthermore, Ahmadi actively participated in the execution of the decisions of the tribunal. When it came to public flagellation, for example, he explained the sentence using a loudspeaker before hundreds of people gathered and mentioned the importance of the armed groups. And you can see that on the excerpt from France 2, which I mentioned a short while ago, where you can see Mr. Al-Mahdi using a loudspeaker to speak to the crowd and explain what the sentence of the Islamic Tribunal of Timbuktu had been. Several points of evidence also point to Mr. Ahmadi's direct involvement with the chiefs of Ansari and Akhmi, such as Abu Zaid, Abdullah Chikedi, Yahya Abdu Alhan, and to a certain extent with Iyad Akhgali. Particularly, Mr. Ahmadi reported directly to Abu Zaid on his activities. He had close and restrictive meetings with these chiefs, and furthermore, he was part of public demonstrations and meetings such as the crisis committee meetings which held in Timbuktu at the time of the events. Al-Mahdi also gave interviews to journalists. Of course, he must have obtained prior authorization for this purpose. I mean, the journalist must have obtained prior authorization for this purpose. Mr. Al-Mahdi, therefore, had freedom to express these views in these matters pertaining to the structures set up in Timbuktu. From mid-September, he also continued to be in the leadership of Hezbollah and relations with Ahmed Musa. He played an important role in the group and participated in a mission to Timbuktu and Gao with Abu Zaid and Nail Makloufi, who was the then emir of Akhmi. The purpose of the mission was to reconcile the movement to the jihad in West Africa with the Tariq ibn Ziyad battalion, which was led by Abu Zaid. Iyad Akhgali, the chief of Ansardin, was also part of that mission. When he returned, Mr. Al-Mahdi and Nabil Makoufi had a car accident in which Nahil Makloufi died, and Mr. Al-Mahdi had a fracture on his leg. Abu Zaid sent his personal car to bring back Mr. Al-Mahdi. Therefore, we must be clear that it was not anybody whosoever who could travel with Nabil Makloufi in the same vehicle and also be provided transportation in Mr. Abu Zaid's personal vehicle. Al-Mahdi was able to resume service in early November 2012, engaging in several diverse activities. He particularly contributed to the organization of the training of the armed groups before the attack on the capital in Bamako. That training lasted 10 days in the Ario region and brought together hundreds of troops. After the debacle following that offensive in January 2013, Ahmadi then left Timbuktu in the company of Abu Zaid, who was killed subsequently. Ahmadi sought refuge in Libya while continuing to serve Iyad Akhgali and Ansardin. And it was during a mission commanded by Iyad that he was intercepted in 2014 in a convoy of vehicles that had tons of weapons and ammunitions from Libya, that was conveying tons of weapons from Libya to Mali. And at that time, of his own volition, he became a member of the Shura, that is the religious council of Ansardin. The evidence, the documentary evidence available confirms this fact. Therefore, the body of evidence portrays him as an intellectual who crossed the Rubicon and became an important member of the active groups that reigned in Timbuktu and over its population by force and violence, including the destruction of various mausoleums as illustrated. In fact, therefore, Al-Mahdi was the chief of the Hezbollah who was in charge of organizing the attacks of these Muslim mausoleums. And it is at this juncture that I will move on to my next point. which is point number 5, pertaining to the specificity of the attack. Mr. President, Your Honors, the attacks on the mausoleum and sacred buildings in Sidi Yaya Timbuktu was not something that happened haphazardly at the end of 2012. There were 4 telling signs that could have been identified. Some mausolea were somewhat destroyed before the months of April and May 2012 without resulting in their absolute destruction. In any event, ACME and Ansaldin subsequently monitored the religious activities that were taking place at those mausoleums. Mr. Mahdi was specifically in charge of this monitoring. He took notes on the conduct of the people of Timbuktu at that time and in relation to those facts. Then, about 1 month before the destruction, Abdallah al-Chingeti, member of the ACNI leadership in Timbuktu, wrote a 2-page document captioned Fath al-Shuku in relation to the duties to raze to the ground the structures and tombs. It is in this context that Abu Zaid consulted Al-Mahdi with regard to the destruction of the mausoleums. And to be very specific, Mr. Al-Mahdi did not raise any objection to taking away something which was not allowed, end of quote, even though he recommended that the mausoleums should not be destroyed and that the population should not be disturbed. This is not a fact that is challenged by the prosecution. Then, during the last days of June 2012, Iyad Ag-Ghali, along with Abdul Zaid, Abdallah El-Chengedi, and Abdul Yahya, took the decision to destroy the mausoleums. It is then, as I've previously stated, that Abu Zaid called upon Al-Mahdi and told him about this decision and gave him the personal duty to implement it in his capacity as the head of Hezbollah. Then Mr. Al-Mahdi proceeded to undertake the necessary planning. He decided to proceed with the destructions starting in the north and coming down to the south of the city. Everything was launched, Mr. President, Your Honors, on or around the 30th of June 2012. The operations lasted some 10 days, during which the 9 mausoleums of Muslim saints were razed to the ground. The door of the Sidi Yahya Mosque was also destroyed. Sidi Yahya is the saint patron of Timbuktu. Now you can see a map showing the various sites. The cemetery to the north, then the Al-Mukhtar cemetery to the south, and all the other cemeteries which I will be talking about, or graves which I'll be talking about subsequently. The first graves were the Sidi Mahmoud graves that were attacked by Mr. Al-Mahdi and others. It contains a number of mausoleums, the mausoleum of Sidi Mahmoud ben Ahmad Mohammed Akid and Mausoleum Sheikh Mahmoud al-Arawani. They arrived at that location at 8 a.m. in the morning. About 100 armed men, including members of the Hezbollah and members of the Islamic police or of armed battalions. The destruction lasted 2 hours, and there was only a pile of rubbish that was left behind after the mausoleums were destroyed. Regarding this site, Mr. Al-Mahdi acknowledged that he had distributed tools and gave recommendations on the manner to proceed. He also admitted to having physically participated in the destruction operations. There is a video available on internet showing Mr. Sidi Mahmoud justifying why those graves were destroyed, stating, and I quote, "What we have just done for these tombs is in line with our fight against deviant practices." After destroying those first 2 mausoleums, Al-Mahdi and the other attackers went to the Sidi el-Mukhtar graves, which were part of the Sheikh Sidi el-Mukhtar mausoleums. It happened on the same day at around 10 a.m. Mr. Ahmadi acknowledged having supervised the destruction of the mausoleum and given recommendations on how to proceed, as well as provide the necessary tools and food and drinks to the attackers. Once again, there is a video recording of the Sidi al-Mokhtar cemetery, which shows Mr. al-Mahdi saying, if a tomb is higher than the others, it has to be brought to the ground. We are going to wipe out from our landscape all that does not belong there. The operations that followed upheld those statements. The mausoleums and the graves were destroyed, and this operation concluded around midday. Then on the same day, in the afternoon, the attackers went to the third cemetery, the Alpha Moya cemetery. The evidence gathered shows that Mr. al-Mahdi and other members of the groups which were present destroyed the Alpha Moya mausoleum, and that attack lasted till sunset. Mr. al-Mahdi acknowledged that he provided recommendations and also actively participated in the said destruction. A video of that event on public media also shows how Zakaria and others proceeded to destroy the mausoleum. That was the first day during which 3 cemeteries were attacked. The next day, the activities continued, and it was the turn of the Three Saints Cemetery, which is located to the southwest of the city near the military camp, that was attacked. This cemetery had 3 mausoleums: Sheikh Mohammed al-Mekki, Sheikh Abdul Qasim Atoni, and Sheikh Sidi Ahmed Ben Amar Aragadi mausoleums. Mr. al-Mahdi again acknowledged having supervised the operations. He even went on to say that these mausoleums were very ancient and that they were destroyed one after the other, and that the task was rather easy, according to him. Once again, there is a video that shows the Three Saints Mausoleum, cemetery rather, which is not far from the Sheikh Sidi Abed Ben Amar Agari Mausoleum. And the witness has testified that Mr. al-Mahdi participated physically in the destruction of the Sheikh Sidi Ben Amar Aragadi Mausoleum. Then it was the turn of the sacred door of the Sidi Yahya Mausoleum, the saint patron of the town, and the 2 mausoleums of the Jingaya Gaber Mosque. As you can see, the mosque is situated in the center of the city, as you can see on the map. The attack of the door of that mosque took place around the 2nd of July, and the mosque had a door which a witness has referred to as one which Mr. Ahmadi denied a request to stop destroying, and went on to describe what happened. There is a video available on the internet showing once again Mr. al-Mahdi pulling off the door with his own hands. Mr. al-Mahdi declared to the prosecution that he indeed pulled off the door with Radwan and Abdallah al-Chingeti. There is also video material available on the internet showing him justifying his actions as being part of the fight against superstition. Less than 10 days later, the other mausoleums, Bahaba Badie and Ahmed Folinki, which are to the west of the Jengari Rabier Mausoleum, were also attacked. Around the 11th of July 2012, around 11 a.m. in the morning. In his statement to the prosecution, Mr. al-Mahdi said that he was told to destroy those 2 mausoleums, and I quote, he did not have to think twice about it, end of quote. He asked for support for the members of the Hezbollah. He supervised the operations, and he confirmed to the prosecution that he physically participated in the destruction. At some point, he even decided to use a bulldozer. There is evidence, video evidence, showing him destroying the mausoleums and giving an interview. It is this destruction which marked the end of the wave of attacks between June and July 2012, for which he is now charged. Later attacks took place in the fall, for which we do not have available material. Now, Mr. President, with your leave, Your Honors, let me go to my sixth point, namely a legal point. We have argued that the accused responsibility as a co-perpetrator of an attack also can be perceived as including encouraging the attack and facilitating its commission by aiding and abetting it in one form of assistance or another, and finally in assisting in any manner whatsoever in the commission of that crime by a group of persons acting together.
Nous avons donc visé les articles 25.3a.
We have quoted articles 25.3a, 25.3b, 25.3c, and 25.3d of the statute. The pre-trial chamber confirmed all these modes of liability, and Mr. Mahdi admitted all these modes of liability in the agreement signed with our office. The body of evidence speaks beyond reasonable doubt to each of these modes of responsibility. That being the case, it is the position of the OTP that it is his responsibility as co-perpetrator that fully represents Mr. Mahdi's participation and commission of the crime. The evidence before your chamber leaves no doubt whatsoever as to the existence of a common plan, an agreement between the various members of the armed groups in Timbuktu involving Mr. Mahdi and in relation to committing the crime, the attacks. The evidence further shows that Mr. Mahdi's participation in the common plan was essential, and it took various forms, including the identification and selection of the sites to be attacked and the drafting of the sermon on the destruction of mausoleums, which was read on the Friday before the attack, as well as the statements justifying the attacks, and more fundamentally, his role in the organization, supervision, and support to the other direct perpetrators of the attacks on the various other sites. Clearly, this crime would have been frustrated or committed in a different manner if Mr. Mahdi had not participated in the preparation and execution of the crimes against the targeted sites. And he, furthermore, provided moral caution for the other attackers based on his role as the head of Hezbollah and the confidence that he enjoyed from Abu Zaid. Therefore, in this matter, your chamber must determine, first of all, whether Mahdi is liable as main perpetrator or direct co-perpetrator under Article 25.3a. This mode of liability deals with Mr. Mahdi's criminal liability as outlined in paragraphs 18 and 20 of our document. However, if you find that Mr. Mahdi does not qualify as direct co-perpetrator, you will then have to look at how each of the crimes outlined in paragraphs 18, 20 would have to be determined based on the various modes of liability. It will be up to the court, therefore, to determine whether Mr. Mahdi is liable for the crimes charged under Article 82E4, based, if necessary, on the mode of liability that is justified by the relevant material elements. Let me now move on to my next point, Mr. President, Your Honors, which deals with what the prosecution intends to present to your honors. How are we going to proceed? First of all, and this is my last point, there is an agreement between the accused and the prosecution in which the accused recognizes his criminal liability. This agreement is binding only between the prosecution and the accused. In any event, today, Mr. Mahdi, in the presence of his two counsels, entered a guilty plea. It is therefore now up to the court and the court alone to assess this plea in the context of the elements or facts of the crime, of the case. For this purpose, the prosecution has provided you with the evidence which I have mentioned before. The evidence has been accepted by the defense, including some 700 photographs, some video material and photographs, and they are all outlined in various filings. And I want to refer to filing 67, 74, 119, and 130. And we must include the agreed facts to these filings, as we can be seen in filings 54 and 83. In view of the guilty plea entered, the public must understand, therefore, today that the prosecution does not intend to deal with each of the 7 pieces of evidence that have been filed before the court. We will deal only with specific aspects, namely starting with an interactive platform. The prosecution will use satellite images, photographs, videos, and other material gleaned from the internet, which are included on the list of our evidence material, to show the situation of the mausoleums before, during, and after the destruction, including the participation of the accused. These elements are authentic and have been accepted by the defense, and which are solid proof corroborating the plea of guilt entered by the accused. The prosecution would also use other material, and this may take place under specific security arrangements, and I apologize to the public for that. We will be calling the following witnesses: P018T, 82, P0431, and P015. In fact, P0151 will testify before P0431. The first prosecution witness, P018, will summarize the prosecutor's investigations into the attacks against the historic monuments and will provide specific details pertaining to the interview with the accused in 2015, as well as information on the conduct of the accused during the interview. These information will relate to the guilt of the accused and modes of liability, as well as other matters pertaining to his voluntary plea of guilt. The second witness will be P0151, who will testify specifically in relation to sites that are listed on the World Heritage List. And our third witness will testify particularly on the importance of the attack sites in relation to the Malian heritage and protection afforded under Malian law. Mr. President, Your Honors, this presentation will give the Chamber and the public an overview of the case, the gravity of the crime, and the diversity of evidence which clearly points to his criminal liability. It will also enable the Chamber to be aware of material gathered via voce in regard to this case. And before I conclude, Mr. President, Your Honors, after giving you an overview of the situation in Timbuktu pertaining to the evidence, the role of Mr. Mahdi, and the unfolding of the facts, as well as certain legal elements, let me conclude by quoting from a Malian minister's statement in April 2013 relating to the events. He described the attacks, and I quote, as an attack on what drives our soul, at the very essence of our cultural values. Their purpose was to destroy our identity and, in a nutshell, our dignity. That will be all, Mr. President, Your Honors. Thank you for your kind attention. And I think it is almost about time for the break. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Duterte. Indeed, it is time to take the morning break. When we resume at 11:30, Mr. Duterte, you will be presenting your first witness.
Non, Monsieur le Président.
No, Mr. President, maybe I wasn't clear. We are going to proceed to an interactive presentation, which I will run myself, and you will see video and audio material, which will then be followed by Sarah Kokilo's turn, and that will probably be in closed session. And then later in the afternoon, during the third session, we should be able to call P0183. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We will reconvene at 11:30.
All rise, Vive.